I would want to know, irrespective of what happened there, whether the myocarditis damage makes one more susceptible to severe heart injury. Don't you want to know? Aren't we allowed to ask the question? You would think the NFL would want to know the answer. Speaking of astonishing, this is something that's going to knock your socks off. Judicial Watch, FDA records show significant number of mRNA test rats born with skeletal deformations. Yes, you heard that right. Skeletal deformations. There was a statistically significant number of rats born with skeletal deformations after their mothers were injected with the vaccine. The documents also reveal Moderna, which is one of the big companies doing the, behind the vaccines, the Moderna vaccine, elected not to conduct a number of standard pharmacological studies on the laboratory's test animals. So a lot of studies that you may not know should have been done, but when you see what they are, you might say, why weren't they done? Weren't done. And, this isn't the first time we've seen that. They tell you, oh, we don't need to do that for vaccines. And you can judge whether that's true or whether that's appropriate or not. Because they could be technically right, but practically wrong, because it's dangerous not to do it. So there were variations in skeletal examinations that included statistically significant increases in the number of rats with one or more wavy ribs and one or more rib nodules. And I can go into detail there, but it's not the sort of thing you would be happy to see. It seemed to me, if you were a competent researcher or a company or fairly looking at this. Now they concluded, though, don't worry, wavy ribs or rib nodules in the litters of rats with this vaccine, a statistically increased number of them, a statistically significant increased number of them. They said that's not an adverse event. Now, some disagree with that. We've cited a study. Whether or not a substance-induced increase in the incidence of fetal skeleton variation should be taken into account for human risk assessment is a long-standing controversial issue. It has been argued that chemical-produced increases in variations are not to be considered for risk assessment because they are unlikely to adversely affect survival or health. The counter-argument is that even not being overtly adverse and conveying no apparent selective disadvantage, a treatment-induced increase in the occurrence of variations means that the chemical agent has the potential to perturb skeleton development. According to this view, under a different condition of exposure or in another species, this perturbation of normal bone formation may give rise to a different and more severe outcome. So there you have the two arguments. A, it's no big deal, or B, it's a really big deal. My concern is it's a really big deal because we should have gotten these documents without having to sue in federal court for them and wait years. If it was no big deal, they would have turned them over to us. That's what I would conclude from this material. Why are we waiting after the fact? Why are we getting after the fact documents confirming or raising questions about the safety and efficacy of the vaccines? That's a scandal for the ages. They did no absorption studies, no metabolism studies, no excretion studies, no pharmacokinetic studies, and no other pharmacokinetic studies were done with the vaccines because, quote, they didn't need to. Pharmacokinetic studies are performed to clarify the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of drug candidates. Sounds important to me. So we've done so much work on this, and I encourage you to go to judicialwatch.org to get the full detail here, because these vaccines are, the issues about this vaccines are not going away. The questions are increasing, and it's frustrating. And though we're proud to do it, but it's still frustrating that it seems Judicial Watch is one of the few entities out there that are getting this core information about the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. I mean, by the time Congress gets its act together, who knows how much more damage will be done. Am I allowed to raise questions about the vaccines and this young football player from the Bills who collapsed on the field? I mean, I don't know if he was even vaccinated. I presume he was. But there's an added risk of myocarditis for certain age groups, including especially young men. And I would want to know, irrespective of what happened there, whether the myocarditis damage makes one more susceptible to severe heart injury. Don't you want to know? Aren't we allowed to ask the question? You would think the NFL would want to know the answer. I mean, thank God this kid's recovering. It's a miracle. But we want answers about the safety of these darn drugs. I mean, especially for age groups for which the risk of COVID is not as great as for other age groups. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.